Cormac McCarthy fans, we are here today to talk about Geoffrey Chaucer and Cormac McCarthy, and I am stoked about this because I took multiple classes on Chaucer at university, and so I have a little bit of love in my heart for Chaucer. And I had this really wacky professor, and he is one of the top Chaucer scholars in the world, but he would walk into class about 30 seconds late and just start talking because he just wanted to throw knowledge at us. And sometimes I would raise my hand for 5 minutes and he wouldn't call on me. And eventually he would call on me and I'd ask a question and he'd look at me and then just keep talking. And in one of the upper level classes I took on Chaucer, that was graduate level, we would read the book out loud, like each story. And because it's in Middle English, a lot of us had like really terrible pronunciation. So for the first week, he made us read. And it was such a struggle because, every couple words he'd be like correcting us. So after a week, he would ask, does anyone want to read? And everyone would be like, no, thank God. But I would raise my hand and be like, me and this girl over here who doesn't know me wants to read. And so then he'd be, all right, you guys can read for a little bit. And just to troll, I would read the story as like bad as I could. I would mispronounce everything on purpose. And then as he was trying to correct me, I would just keep going. I was like a battering ram. I wasn't going to stop until I was done. And to make matters even crazier, I remember so much from Chaucer because this guy was the only English philosophy, humanities professor I ever had that did extensive multiple choice exams on the material, but he would give us nothing to study. He would come into class, start lecturing, and then we would take notes. And then we'd have a multiple choice test, but it would be read to us orally. So he'd say, question 1, in the Pardoner's Tale. And once a week, there'd be like 50 questions. The test would take the entire class. And then at the end, you'd have to say, can you repeat number 23 again? But what he didn't realize is that method makes such an easy way to cheat because when he'd say, answer A is blah, blah, blah. And if it's answer A, all the smart kids, like the PhDs, they would all go, and I'll start bubbling in A. So I'd be like, must be A. And so in the Blood Meridian archive, McCarthy mentions Chaucer's The Pardoner's Tale. So if you guys don't know very much about the Canterbury Tales, it's about a group of pilgrims pilgriming from London to Canterbury, and then at the end, they're going to have a storytelling contest, and the winner gets a free meal. And so the book comprises of those stories. The text is incomplete. So when we look at The Pardoner's Tale, it's actually meant to be a sort of diptych, which is in the classical sense, one of these 2-panel pieces of art. So there's a couple of different elements of this book that are not just influential in Blood Meridian, but further McCarthyian tales. And one of the cores of the tale is actually that a vicious man can still tell a moral story. And when we're looking at Blood Meridian, that's an interesting angle for the narration or even the characters. Do they view themselves as moral? And what is the purpose of Blood Meridian? Are we supposed to be learning something within it? So the story starts off with 3 men in the tavern, that is described as the Devil's Temple. And so then the pardoner condemns while telling the story the sins of the tavern, which are gluttony, drinking, gambling, and swearing. And so while they're getting drunk and having this, hoorah, they hear a bell and they realize one of their friends has died and death has taken them. So they go on a quest to kill death. And an old man tells them that you can find him at the foot of this oak tree. And so the men get to this oak tree and they find this big bag of coins on the ground. Does this sound very familiar? Yes, now we are in No Country for Old Men land. And one of the themes of this story that is said is radix malorum est cupitus, which means the love of money is the root of all evil. And as we're about to see, and as we see in No Country for Old Men with Llewellyn and Moss, it doesn't end up well. So they all draw straws to see who should go get some food and wine, and so that the other 2 can stay with the money and sleep under the tree overnight. And so while the one man leaves, the other 2 plot to kill the other man. They're like, we're going to kill him so we can have more of the share. But while the other guy's gone, he also plots to kill them, and so he poisons the food and the wine. And so when the man with the food and wine comes back, they kill him, and then they drink the wine, and then they all die. And now we're going to dive into theory land about the Pardoner's Tale, because there's so much in here, you guys, that is actually fire. I'll drop the big one at the start. Do you guys know about the origins of vampires and the Wandering Jew? So the men, before they go off to kill death, do an inquiry with an old man about where to find death. And he says, I've been trying to die forever. I can't die. I've been doing whatever I can to die. And this actually symbolizes the original vampire, aka the Wandering Jew, which is the objective correlative of the pardoner's fear of growing old. And the deathless old man personifies what would happen if the old man actually succeeded in killing death. So the Wandering Jew is when Jesus was walking, with the cross to be killed, be crucified or whatever, someone spits on him, a Jew spits on him. And it was told that that this man, as we see right here, has to wander forever because of what he did to Jesus. To go even crazier, I'm going to start dropping rabbit holes. The Pardoner's Tale was the inspiration of the Lord of the Rings. Two men find an unguarded treasure. The effect on them is disastrous, and eventually it puts them at odds with each other. And it creates such a greed in their heart that they can't enjoy each other at all anymore. And we actually know that Tolkien uses as the main inspiration for kind of the Smeagol, Sam, and Frodo arc of the Lord of the Rings. My professor I just mentioned actually wrote a book on all of Tolkien's influences, Chaucer's influences on Tolkien, and they're massive. I mean, it's basically the main influence of the Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien was a Chaucer scholar himself. And so now to go to the end of the rabbit hole, literally, the pardoner also has no balls, is sterile, and is gay, because he's condemning all these different terrible things in the tavern, but he never condemns sodomy. And he is the story features an all-male cast. In the story, it is said that death does not carry a scythe, which is typical, especially for this time, but a spear, aka the phallus. And another thing that is somewhat homoerotic is that while the two men are killing the younger man and wrestling him, they are doing it from the back. They get him on his back and they are stabbing him in the back. And like I said, this may seem a little bit woo and a little bit like a reach, and this is a Cormac McCarthy video. But when you kind of tie all these symbols together and realize that Chaucer can't be writing about an openly gay character like this at the time, then it makes a lot more sense. So the Pardoner's Tale, we could call a cautionary tale. For instance, when the kid and the two men go into the town, it reads like one of these stories, and what happens, it ends in violence. And the Mennonite also says there is no such joy in the tavern as upon the road, which is kind of within this story. And you could say Suttree is very Chaucerian-esque with the telling from multiple different perspectives. Stories, McCarthy does a lot of this. I mean, this isn't uncommon, but it is kind of the Chaucerian thing that you have different chapters dedicated to different people. Even though McCarthy usually limits it only to a couple characters, anywhere from 2 to 5 at most. And then obviously this is a very similar story to what ends up happening in No Country for Old Men. So I would recommend everybody go check out the Canterbury Tales. This is the original version. If you want to have an easier time, get the abridged version, roll through it, maybe read read that and this side by side, get some notes, watch some lectures, and once you understand the stories, it opens up a whole world, because there are so many different so many different stories are based off of these Chaucerian stories, because Chaucer was also Shakespeare's main influence. And so eventually I will create a whole series on Chaucer, now that I kind of reread The Pardoner's Tale right now and had a good time with it. So that may happen soon. But until then, I will see you guys in the next video.